This is a pretty good start too. I wasn't expecting this kind of uh, uh, group, but welcome. I'm George Garcia. I'm the curator for the Orchid House. And this is my assistant talking about the tillandsias or air plants and the Staghorn ferns. Um, the first group I'm going to cover is the tillandsias. And if you don't mind, I might be reading some, so make sure that at least I give you all the introduction of the tillandsias. There's about 650 species of tillandsias, and they're in the bromeliad family. So if and they're native to forests and mountain and desert of northern Mexico, southeastern U.S., Mesoamerica, and the Caribbean, to meet at Argentina. Their leaves are more or less silver in color, are covered with specialized cells capable of rapidly absorbing water that gathers on them. Air plant roots are used for attachment and not to collect nutrients. Unlike other plants that the root gather the nutrients, the air plants don't. And they can be mounted in cork, tree fern, slab, wood, and don't use driftwood because the driftwood has a lot of salt that it has collected. So a lot of people say, well, put it in driftwood because it looks real pretty. Don't ever mount anything that you want to survive into a piece of driftwood. I used to collect driftwood. I used to put it in a bucket of water, let it sit there for about a year. It's not good. It doesn't work. So they look real pretty, but no. Okay. Also, do not use copper wire to attach these plants because copper is toxic to these plants. It's also toxic to orchids. You don't use copper wire to attach any plant that you want to survive. So a lot of times the wires from the telephone have it covered. You can use that as long as the plastic cover, does not rub off. You can use wire, fishing lines, or plastic tie, or even glue. But we don't recommend glue. I don't recommend glue. Because if you want to move that plant, it's glued in there, you're going to damage it too much. Also, you want to make sure that when you remove the plant, that you're able to salvage as many of those roots as possible. And if you use glue, you're going to be pulling a lot of those roots out. So you have to be careful. Also, you have to use glue that won't wash off with water. So that can get pretty expensive too for putting a plant like this in a piece of wood. And then also make sure that you have a lot of patience because these plants are not instant bloomers or instant you're going to get a big plant out of it. So it takes time. Like this one, it's been here in this piece of wood now for close to a year, and finally we're seeing a couple of new growths, but it's very slow growing. They're very slow growing. Also, if you're lucky, you might get a bloom. If you're lucky. Sometimes they don't have the strength to be able to flower, and the flower will drop off before it develops. This one is pretty lucky because I'll tell you all a real good story on this. I had one like this in my oak tree in the front yard. The plant was about this big. I mean, it was huge. And one day, I guess one of those squirrels decided, oh, this is good. Let's tear it up. And I started finding pieces of it all over my yard. And I went to town to it. They're destroyed. This is part of what was left over. So this one can tolerate cold. It has been in my front yard where it snowed and got their snow on top of it and still survived. So it's a good plant to have if you want to put it in your oak tree. That's it. Make sure you keep those squirrels away. So I tried catching squirrels and releasing them in somebody else's yard. It doesn't work. They multiply like rabbits. So if not, then others will come in and take over their place. And then make sure that you bring the plants in when temperatures reach 50 or minus that. So cutoff period 50 degrees. Doesn't happen with all of them. Some of them will tolerate a little bit of cold. So you can display them, make a terrarium out of like a candle holder, and put it in the window in the kitchen where it gets a little bit more moisture. And every once in a while, take it, soak it, give it a good soaking, put it back in there. It makes good display piece. And,
How often would you need to take it out and give it a good soaking?
at least once a week.
Oh,
You can mince them a little bit. Don't overwater, okay? Because you can kill your plant overwatering. A lot of times you can tell by the way the leaf starts getting kind of really wrinkly, and it's time to give it a good soaking. Yeah. If you want to see some of the Tillandsias that we have, they're located here at the bromeliad house. And they're in a wall, most of them. You can find some at Lowe's. Lowe's has a good supply of them. And they're really pretty. Also the internet, you can buy a lot of different ones through the internet. So make sure that you find out if you're going to keep them in your backyard. Put them up,
Yeah,
no,
those are really, really good.
Yeah. But I like my stuff crunchy, like when I
Turner's also has some that you can buy. Anyway, I am going to show you all how to do this, okay? Normally, I will not put on Tillandsias. I don't put a lot of the moss on it when I attach it. I prefer to water it good at least twice a week when I don't put water, when I don't attach it with moss in it. But in this situation, because the twig is small, I'm gonna put a little bit of moss in it, and we're gonna try to find the best place to put it, which would be right around where you the curve of the. A lot of times, what I'll do is if I have a piece of wood like this, I'll find an area like this and put it right there, where it kind of sits. This one would be a little bit harder to attach, but it can be done. If we can use fishing wire to attach them. Sometimes you need more than two hands to do this, so bear with me. And this situation.
You said you had a volume control problem? You had a volume problem?
For purposes of
Volume?
show,
Turn it
I'm
up.
gonna take a little bit of moss. This is Staghorn moss. That is New Zealand Staghorn moss. They sell Staghorn moss and some of those places that don't. It has a lot of other stuff in it that makes it kind of hard to work with. Make sure that you soak the Staghorn moss at least a day.
So I've heard that some people recommend using glue, like actually glue. You don't recommend that.
Recommend what?
Glue, actually using glue to attach them.
No, because essentially crunching. I'm gonna use this to attach it. And somehow I don't have my reading glasses on, so it doesn't pay to get old. Good thing about some of this items that you can use for attaching a plant is you can cut them off once they get established, and they'll look real pretty. So essentially, as you all see here, normally what I would do is if y'all can see that the mother plant, it's got some babies coming out. The mother plant is the one that's is in the attached to the wood here, and the idea on that is to get the babies to establish themselves, put out roots, attach themselves to the wood, so that you can cut off. So anyway, in this case, I use the zip tie to attach it. The wood, the mother plant is next to the wood, and if we have the babies that are coming to the side, so essentially we want them to attach themselves to the wood. And that way you can hang this, or you can even put it in your kitchen in something like this and just show it off or enjoy it. And then when the plant is attached to the wood, you can just cut it off. Or if you're using that this fishing wire, it's you can't even see it. So That's the idea of attaching it to a piece of wood. So, or if you don't want to do that, you can take ma'am,
I couldn't see. Did you put that right over the top of the plant?
I put it
Or
over.
did you pull a leaf or two down and put it on that?
Yeah, in other words, I put a little bit of pressure, but not too much, because I don't want to squish the plant to where I've hurt the plant. I want it to, for it to put roots into the piece of wood.
Right, but what I mean is, did you put it over top the whole plant, or did you pull a couple of leaves down and to get those? Just so
Right
it
at the
holds on?
base of the main plant.
Okay, I guess somebody couldn't see that. but-
In other words, there's two babies that are coming out
Yeah.
here, so I put it in between the babies.
Okay, all
Okay,
right.
so in other words, I want those babies to put out roots and attach themselves
Right,
and keep putting out more babies. So this will form a clump, this type of tillandsia. And essentially, you want it to cover as much as possible or become a pretty good sized clump. They look real pretty. They put out a little flower, blue, a little blue flower. Okay. There's different colors, flowers on the different varieties that there's available. So, but you can also take some bark and fill up a container like this. You don't necessarily need to attach it to a piece of wood. You can put some bark or and just put it like that. And it makes a really nice decoration. Enjoy and enjoying. your
So you don't
delivery.
divide them? You don't divide them?
You can when they get pretty good size, but on something this small, I wanted to get big because I want to enjoy those flowers too. I want to work at least once a year when they get to that point that they start flowering. I want the big clump. Then when you have that big clump, you can divide them. Like I was explaining, this was a huge clump. And these are pieces of that clump that was left over that I had to go pick up in the yard. Again, that's spoiled, yeah. And it's doing really well. It's been there almost a year. So if you want, I want it to cover the whole thing. Then I might get some cuttings out of that and put it in another piece of wood. But and as you can see here clearly, you can divide this thing, this lances, and just cut it up and
Okay, what's his name? What kind of wood is that that's attached to the air plant?
okay, this is cedar. I use cedar because the main, well, this has been probably in the near the ground. This was from a big trunk that got pulled out, and I like the roots, the root system of cedar. As you can see here, how pretty it looks. This is, I mean, they look really gorgeous pieces of cedar. Even when you cut it, that's been sitting in the ground or out of the ground for many years, it's still pretty solid. And it makes good attachment or good display pieces. So, and what you can do is this one like this, and just tie it there. Yeah, no, I'm going to use something different for this size. But
So did you say you don't always use the moss?
I don't know what's used for,
Okay.
or moss, especially on this particular type of Valencia. I it's it just depends on the Valencia itself. If I don't want to, this one will sit outside. So I'm not too concerned about. Yes, ma'am.
When you have them outside, do you still try to soak them once a week?
Depends on the rain.
Okay.
Like this week, we got quite a bit of rain in some areas. No,
But then you,
I
I
just,
mean, if you do have to soak them, do you have to take them down and put them in water?
no, you can just
use a hose?
take a hose and just hose them down. Okay. To me, because I've had this particular Valencia a long time, and it's been sitting outside, and other plants have been sitting outside. If it survives, fine. It's already been through quite a bit of shock, so what's the, and plus, this ones you can even, if you can even take a piece of the fishing wire and just hang them like this, and they'll be okay. They'll put out new growth and turn the right side. Make sure that they don't get full direct sunlight. Protect them from the direct sunlight. Like I said, this one's they are on their oak trees. But the only time that they get a little bit more sunlight is when the oak trees lose their leaves once a year. So you can just practically do anything with this Valencias. You can work with them and do some real pretty, even use them in terrariums and just fill up the whole terrarium. Like here, you could even put 2 or 3 different kinds of Valencias and make a real nice display that you can enjoy in your window sills. People like to put them in windows right where you're washing, so they get a little bit of moisture coming in. They're easy to take care of. You don't have to do a whole lot to them, or even fertilize them. Some people don't even recommend them fertilized, giving them fertilizer. But some say fertilize once a year, or fertilize twice a year, and so on. So you have different information that you can get from different individuals that are growing these plants. Also depends on the particular type of Valencia. So, to me, I have a Valencia, put it outside. If it can tolerate cold, leave it outside, let it do its thing. If it takes 2 or 3 years for it to put on new baby, that's fine. I'm not gonna, I'm not going to go overboard trying to take care of it. Yes, ma'am.
In the terrarium situation, you aren't that concerned about watering it, are you?
Oh, no.
Just
No,
leave it
you
alone.
have to be
Just
careful
leave
that
it alone.
you don't overwater them.
Yeah.
Okay?
Just leave it.
You have to keep an eye on them if you're going to take care of them inside. Okay? If you're gonna put them outside during nice days and all that, then you still would have to bring them in when it gets cold, because here we can't keep them outside. But normally, if we were living in some area where we didn't have a winter, or the winters were real mild, then we didn't have to worry about that. But here, we do. And like I said, the mother of this plant has been sitting in this trunk of the oak tree, and it's gotten cold and it's done well. Yes, ma'am.
So it survived last year's 10 and 12-degree weather we had here for a few days.
I left them out, whatever I had. Yes,
And it survived.
it
But do you
survived.
think that's because it was so big? Do you think a small one would survive that kind of
Well,
weather?
by last year, I didn't have the big mother plant. I just had pieces like this. Okay, so I had some pieces that I put in the backyard, but they stayed in the backyard. I lost about 100 orchids, but I didn't lose
It's a risk,
the
but
thing,
you
the
stand a good
air
chance of
plant that
making
if it survived, fine. If it didn't, fine. So,
When you're talking about watering, do you soak them or do you spray them?
When you're watering, do you spray them or do you
usually
dunk them?
I just water with a water hose. Okay. In other words, I'm not being that loving with this Tillandsias, okay? But you can, at least once a week, you need to give it a good soaking, okay? At least, if you want it to thrive. And then you can mist them during the rest of the week. So if it's like this, sitting in a piece of wood with no moss, then you need to at least every couple of days mist them. So does that answer your question?
I guess so.
I guess-
Are they sensitive to being touched? You know, like some succulents or cactus, you're not supposed to touch them because of oils or whatever,
No, not on this plants. Not on the,
because they have that kind of ashy finish like succulents do.
well, you're not, like, on this, you're actually, I don't worry too much about that on the Tillandsias, okay? On certain plants, yes. You have to be careful because the oils on your hands, it's better to use gloves. And if you're not sure, use gloves. Not just for the sake of the plant, but for your hands. You can have a cut, like I have a cut right there. I almost thought, well, wear a glove, because I cut my finger pretty well there and it's not healing, this is a joint. And I thought, well, I'm dealing with a plant here, I'm dealing with a piece of wood that may have something in here that if it gets in my cut, it's gonna make it even worse. So since I'm not doing a whole lot of messing with it, I'm trying not to use that finger. I'm trying to stay away from that. But yes, that's one thing you have to be careful with, because you could get, there's certain diseases and certain viruses that can get your cuts, and you can, it can make it worse. So you have to be careful. Any other questions on tillandsias? They have.
Hey, just one, did you ever drill a shallow hole in the wood to mount it?
Oh, yes, all the time. I have, that's why I like to use cedar. Okay, when I have cut a slab cedar by 8 thick, I have drilled holes and put plants through there in the middle. Okay, so they do real well. Okay, so that's another thing that on a piece of wood like this, you could take it and drill a hole there and put the plant there. With a little bit of moss, it should do real well. You can also use pots like this to put them. So it's there's many things that you can do with it. Go to Lowe's and look to see what and how they have this place is tillandsias, because they have they have so many different ones and so many different ways of displaying them. And by them, I enjoy them because they're really interesting plants, especially that you really don't have to do a whole lot to it. Okay, not like roses. You have to watch to do this, what to do, how you do it, where they go in the soil, what type of soils to use, the fertilizers that you use, and so on, so on. So, if you don't want to water too much with the plants, just get a whole bunch of them and just see how they do. And if they don't do, throw it in the trash and buy some more. That's why they bring them.
Is there anything you can do to encourage the blooming, the little blooming?
No. They'll bloom when you want them, when you don't want them to bloom, or when you're not even expecting to.
Yeah, I've got some that are blooming and it's cold weather and they're beautiful fuchsia, colors.
To tell you the truth, they do that with the orchids, the phalaenopsis orchids, and a lot of those greenhouses that they grow them, they lower the temperatures. Before you know it, they have the whole greenhouse is full of spikes and flowers. That's why they bring them into H-E-B, Lowe's, Home Depot, and all that, because they've been growing them just for spikes to get get them to flower, so that I don't know about this tillandsias, whether they do that for the commercial trade. Okay, because I've never been to a greenhouse where they grow these ones for commercial sites, but I've been to for the orchids, and it's amazing that they lower the temperatures real low, so that they can get that flower to go, just so that they can bring 20, 30 to Lowe's or Home Depot or H-E-B, just so that they can have something to sell. Even in the summertime, when they shouldn't be blooming, they do that. Okay. So this plants,
They have a mind of their own.
they have no flower when you least expect. Okay. This one was putting out flowers, and I had it in it. I had it in a pot like this, just by itself, with no mix in it. And it, like I said, leftovers from the squirrel that decided that it was going to mess with my plants. So, unfortunately. Let me talk to you all about Staghorn ferns. This is a Staghorn fern, okay? And these are actually the leaves, and that's why they're called staghorn. They can be called elkhorn ferns because essentially they're the leaves look like the horns of staghorn. And staghorns are really more of a British name than we would use for a period. Elks usually have long horns that are spiky, not like this. So, but the staghorns actually their horns almost look like this. So, anyway, this is the actual leaf of the staghorn fern, and this is a protective shield, kind of like a leaf that protects the roots of the staghorn. So all it does, that's all it does. It protects the roots. So and again, the staghorn ferns are found in tropical wool, and is a member of the Polypodiaceae family. I don't know what some of this term, but and there are 15 known species of staghorn. So, and there's many varieties on hybrids. So they've been hybridizing them. It's an epiphyte, meaning it gets its moisture and nutrients from the air, and it grows in tree trunks, branches, and rocks. The staghorn fern produces two different types of fronds, either basal or foliar. This is the basal, this one here, and this is the frond. And basal are called shields or small flat leaves to cover the root structure, as I mentioned. And they're sterile and help with nutrient uptake, collect water, and debris. So in other words, this thing, once it gets established, whatever falls down, it tends to collect around it. That's how it gets a lot of the nutrients. Because in the tropics, we have monkey and bird droppings, and a lot of times it falls and it helps feed the plant. This type of fern will produce it's brownish area under the leaves that is produces spores, and that's how it reproduces. It's interesting because at one time, many years back before I even got into this kind of stuff, I would see the tree fern, this big ferns attached to trees, and these were huge, and they would have this dark brown things on the leaves here, and I said, what is that? And a couple of years later, I started seeing babies coming out in different areas of the trees, and I said, then I found out that that's what it was. It was producing spores, and those spores were attaching themselves to the tree bark, and they were coming out with little babies all over the place. So this will reproduce itself too. As it gets larger, it produces babies all around. This is a baby from a big one that we have here at the botanical gardens over in the Amelia house. I think it's huge. They're heavy. They get pretty heavy. So, and they make it nice. The only thing is they grow big. So to have inside the house is almost impossible unless you don't have anything else in your house and all you want to have is that plant in there, because then you're gonna have to water it, you're gonna have water inside your house or even in your porch or wherever you want to keep it. But they do grow pretty good size. So unless you don't feed it or you don't care if it stays small, if you want to do that, it may be a good house plant for you. You can do the same thing that you do with the Phalaences, just put it in a container and put it where it gets moisture when you're washing dishes or whenever, and then a little bit of light. Make sure it doesn't get direct sunlight. It does not like the sun. Like a lot of ferns, it still does not like sunlight. It likes more of a sheltered sun. It needs light, believe me, because that's the only way it's going to grow big. But it'll get sunburned, and you don't want the leaves to get sunburned. You'll kill it. So,
How do you divide up the babies that pop up? How do you separate it from the rest of it?
they're attached to the mother plant. Okay, what you try to do is separate as much as possible without destroying too much of the root system. So you have to use knife and just kind of try to pull it out without destroying that root system. Because essentially, that's what's going to keep your plant alive too. So, you also need to protect this plant from cold. Okay, so 55 degrees is safe. I would say a little bit lower than that, but no, don't take a chance. Because there's a lot of plants that don't like cold, and even if they stay out lower than 55, a little bit lower than 55, you still won't see the damage until maybe 6 months later, and then by then we may be going downhill. So you want to make sure that you protect that plant if you love it. If you don't care, just go buy another one. Pay $17 for another baby, or you have a friend that has a big one that can give you little ones like this. Fine. Yeah. But I have not had the pleasure of growing them myself in this area. So I
So all that fibrous material is the plant roots. It's not something you've added to it.
which one here?
Yeah.
That's part of the root system right there. Okay. It's been separated from the mother plant for at least 4 or 5 days at least. But really, that's not good. We should have planted it, but we have a chance. We're going to show you all how to put it. Okay. Fertilize on 1:1 ratio. 1:1, which means if you have fertilizer that dissolves in water, the numbers are 20-20-20, 10-10-10, whatever you can find. But very light fertilizer. And some say fertilize twice a year, some fertilize once a month. So, I mean, I can ask more there to tell me to fertilize it. So you're gonna say, well, I'll fertilize them on a weekly basis. You know? If our plants are doing well, that's fine. But some of the you can get so many different, so much information from so many different people, and it's going to be all different. Okay. So whatever works for you, it's fine. If you kill it, go buy another one. Okay? Until you get it right. That's how we learn. Okay? We learn by our mistakes, hopefully. Sometimes we don't, but sometimes we do. Anyway, on this one, what other side is to do, we're going to pot it in a piece of cedar. This is a big chunk of cedar that I had sitting around. I finally decided to split it and do something with it. I wasn't going to do anything with it until I got into it. Oh, do something with it. So do something. I'm doing something with it. I could use it. I could use this, and it'd be real pretty. It'd be a real nice showpiece. But I'm saving this one for orchids. Okay. Since I don't grow them, we'll put in something else. But for some, if you can find a piece of wood like this, that would be ideal to put something like that. Just put it in the flat side or even the rough side. And eventually what will happen, it will cover the whole thing. And you can hang it. Also, you can use a slab of bark. This is bark. You can put it there, and before you know it, in our greenhouses, or even in the summertime, we take it out and put it in the shade, and it'll take over. But I'm going to use this because this is fair. Okay, so, and it's easier to use. So what I do is take a handful. So these are different baskets that we can use to plant this. We can just put it like this, or fill that up, and put it in there. Just hang it. The same thing with that. To me, this is not what this plant is supposed to be, which is supposed to be on a slab, and I'm mimicking how it grows in the wild. So, and that's what you want to do. You don't want to do what we humans have done to a lot of plants, put them in a pot. Well, there's a lot of plants that don't like to be in a pot. Before you know it, they start coming out of the pot. So there's a lot of pretty pots, okay? And what happens? Roots start coming out, and plants start coming out of little pots. And then what I do is that, go in there and dig it out. And, to me, I wish this area had better weather. There's 78 degrees and down to 30 degrees, and then back again to 17, then back to 30. This is not good for the plants, unfortunately. So anyway, back to this thing. What we do to this ferns is we make a base for it. And what you do is you put some moss in there. And then take it. You have to make a base for it so that the roots can start going through and attaching themselves to the piece of wood. Keep in mind, I'm using this what is this called?
Mesh.
This is where the avocados come from. Just put them in bags like this. So I decided to use this since it's a little bit forgiving. what I'm doing is taking the netting, then I'm gonna secure the netting in the back. One thing about cedar, it's hard, but I love it. What I'm doing is making sure that we secure both from top and bottom here. That's why you need 4 hands. Unfortunately, we're not aliens that we can have grown 3 or 4 hands.
That's what friends are for.
It moved on me. So we'll fix it here. That's what
Nice.
the Staghorn fern should look like. Make sure that it's secured in place, and they'll start growing. But be patient, okay? It does not grow overnight. They'll sit here probably for about 8, 9 months before you start seeing any kind of activity. So you have to, like a lot of certain plants, is if you don't have that patience to be able to wait to see some results, it may not be the plant for you, but they sure are pretty good. And they make a nice display once you get them set up. So, like I
Can we
said,
pass that around?
sure.
Camera first of all. That's lovely.
Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Do you mix it regularly like the tilapia?
Yeah, you have to. Carol, you're more familiar with this.
Yes, we took apart one big fern because it had fallen from the tree. And it was huge. We took it apart, mounted it on wood, and they did well as long as we watered them every day. We misted them every day to keep them moist. Okay. Well, once we got distracted and no longer watered them, most of them died, but a few of them hung on. And so we started watering them again, misting them, and they came back. So just, there's degrees of dead, just because it looks dead, don't stop, misting it and watering it, keep it going. We did it every day, especially in the summertime.
Just remember, they're tropical plants. They're used to growing in the tropics where it rains every afternoon. Maybe they get a rest of 1 day or so, and they get soaked again. In some months, they get every day as rain. But when you're starting a plant like this, you need to make sure that you keep an eye on it. Once they get the roots established, give them water.
And George, they don't have very much soil on there.
Right.
It's not like they have a big giant pot full of moisture to pull from. And so what they get on that soil mat
Mhm.
there is all the water that they get,
Yeah.
other than.
Make sure that, if you put moss in it, that moss stays, moist. Because that's the key to root development. Yes, ma'am.
I rescued a big staghorn from a nursery in Taft. And we cut cedar fence boards. My husband cut boards and made me basically a bark. And then I used the plastic chicken netting.
Chicken worm.
And I only soak, I have a children's sandbox and I soak them every 7 to 10 days. So I don't have to water every day because the cedar's wet. And then the sphagnum moss that I put in there too, they're growing. But if they're in dappled shade and stuff, and I brought them in, what was it, 7 or 10, they're in the garage. Because my husband's been able, with two little space heaters, we can keep the garage at 55. But, because I knew they didn't like cold. My question was, and I guess to you, I catch the little green tree frogs in them, that's okay?
Yes,
Right?
yes. The green tree frogs are
The little-
actually your bug catchers. They're gonna keep the roaches down and all the other things that will come. But they don't keep like rodents down.
Right, so I
So,
don't have
but
that.
yeah, the green frog, the tree frogs are great.
I can't remember the shield thing, but there's a name
It's a
for it.
pad, yeah.
Okay, they die and that's how they feed. They feed off of that. It's continually growing a shield,
Correct,
right?
correct,
And so that's part of their feed, is
correct.
that deterioration. If you'll look at them, there's a stack up. They're a neat plant.
It makes nice to, especially when they get that size, to enjoy outside when you have nice weather. So it's, they're interesting plants, okay? Especially when they start putting out those spores.
Oh, I'm excited because I've got several babies
Mhm.
coming and I've gone in and cut the mesh so that they can come on
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, if you are able to get the spores, put them in moss, you can try to get babies established. So,
I didn't know about the baby.
I have a question. On those spores that you were talking about, I have some and I thought, oh my gosh, they're growing a fungus or something. I didn't realize that's what they were. Can you flake that off or how do you
you should be
harvest
able
it?
to- If you're ready to come out, then you should be able to just scrape them.
Scrape it off?
But you need to put them in something that they can sprout. And the best bet is having moss. Yeah. That's what I would do.